Anna stood at the entrance of the grand hall, her heart racing as she gripped her bouquet. The sound of the wedding march played softly in the background, but it felt distant, as if coming from another world. She tried to steady her breath, but it felt impossible. Today was supposed to be the happiest day of her life, the moment she married David, the man who had promised her forever, the man she had loved for years. But today, something didn't feel right. She glanced toward the altar where David stood, his broad shoulders squared, his face framed by the soft light from the stained glass windows. But there was something in his eyes, something that didn't belong. She told herself it was nerves. "It's just nerves," she whispered to herself. Asterisk, you've waited for this moment. Don't let anything ruin it. Asterisk, but even as her legs moved forward, she couldn't shake the unease that gnawed at her. Her feet carried her slowly down the aisle, the soft rustle of her gown the only sound that filled her ears. The guests were standing now, all eyes on her. The flashes of cameras ignited the air, capturing what should have been a perfect moment. But Anna's focus was solely on David. He was looking at her with that familiar, loving gaze, but something about it felt distant, almost empty. She reached the altar, her hands trembling as she stood before him. The officiant began the ceremony, his words a blur in her mind. Anna tried to calm herself. Everything is fine, she thought, her heart pounding in her chest. Asterisk, this is the day I've waited for. This is my wedding day. Asterisk. Then, when the time came, she lifted her veil. For a moment, the world stood still. The air was thick with silence. Her breath caught in her throat. The face she expected to see, David's familiar, reassuring smile, was gone. Instead, a stranger stood before her, a man she barely recognized. His eyes, a pale blue like David's, but his features were sharper, more angular. His expression was a mix of nervousness and something she couldn't quite place. Who is he? Anna blinked, hoping for clarity. She felt as though the room had spun, her thoughts lost in a haze. She wanted to speak, but her voice wouldn't cooperate. Her mind screamed David, but the man in front of her was not David. His lips parted, as if to speak, but her breath was shallow, her legs unsteady. Her heart was a jackhammer in her chest. The officiant seemed just as confused, stumbling over his words, unsure of what to do. Anna, he said cautiously, looking between her and the man. This is Mark. Mark. The name barely registered. Anna's gaze darted to the man's face, searching for some trace of recognition. Mark, she'd met David's brother once, years ago, at a family gathering. He had looked different then, younger, more carefree, but the face in front of her now, it felt like a stranger's face. She shook her head, trying to process what she was seeing. Asterisk, this isn't right. This isn't my wedding. Asterisk. Where's David? She asked, her voice cracking. She could feel the weight of the room's attention on her, the eyes of all their friends and family burning into her skin. She didn't care. Her world was crumbling in real time. This was not supposed to happen. This was supposed to be her moment. Mark shifted uneasily. He took a step toward her, his hands raised in a gesture of apology. I'm sorry, Anna. David couldn't make it. He's in the hospital. There's been an accident. An accident. The words barely made sense. Anna's mind fought to connect the dots. Hospital, accident, David? A cold wave of shock washed over her, her pulse quickening. David's in the hospital. Why hadn't anyone told her? She turned to the officiant, her face pale. Why wasn't I told? The question slipped out before she could stop it, but the anger and confusion coursing through her left no room for politeness. I'm sorry, the officiant said, glancing at Mark for reassurance, but Mark just looked lost. He stepped forward again, his voice low and apologetic. David wanted you to have your day, Anna. He didn't want to disappoint you. So, I came in his place. I know it's not what you expected, but please, believe me, he's been trying to reach you." The world seemed to tilt beneath Anna's feet. Mark's words swirled around her like a storm, her head spinning. David is in the hospital, and he let Mark stand in for him. She tried to focus, to pull herself together, but the more she tried, the more everything around her seemed to fall apart. She looked at Mark, her fiancé's brother, and back at the guests, who were murmuring softly, unsure of what to do. The pity in their eyes only made the situation worse. Tears blurred her vision, and a lump rose in her throat. Why didn't anyone tell me? Why didn't they stop the wedding? The anger bubbled up inside her, threatening to overwhelm her. How could they all stand there, pretending everything was fine, when nothing was right? How could David's family let this happen? She took a shaky breath, the weight of the moment heavy on her chest. "Why didn't you tell me, Mark? Why didn't you stop it?" Mark opened his mouth to speak, but the words didn't come. Anna's heart ached, but the pain was mixed with a growing sense of betrayal. This wasn't the wedding she had dreamed of. It wasn't even close. This was a lie. Her eyes searched the room for any sign of familiarity, anything to anchor her to the life she thought she knew. But it was gone. Everything was gone. And the worst part was, she didn't even know who to blame. Anna stood frozen, her breath shallow, as the weight of Mark's words crushed her. "David's in the hospital," she repeated, barely able to process what he was saying. The room felt colder now, as if the very air had shifted, thickened with the heaviness of a truth she wasn't ready to hear. She had never seen Mark like this, his face pale, his eyes filled with a kind of guilt that made her stomach churn. She wanted to run, to leave, to escape the suffocating reality that was closing in on her. But she couldn't move. She couldn't think. All around her, the silence was deafening. The guests, who had once looked at her with admiration, were now looking away, their faces uncertain. Whispers floated through the air like ghosts, but Anna couldn't bring herself to care. Her mind kept replaying Mark's words over and over again. David is in the hospital, but why hadn't anyone told her? Why had they let her walk down the aisle, her heart full of love, her mind full of expectations, only to rip it all away in a moment? Mark's voice broke through her thoughts. "Anna, please, I didn't want this. I didn't want to hurt you. But David, he didn't want you to cancel the wedding. He didn't want you to be disappointed." The betrayal hit Anna like a punch to the gut. How could David do this to her? How could he lie to her, let his brother stand in for him? She wanted to scream, to lash out, to demand answers. But the tears that threatened to spill over made it impossible to form words. She looked at Mark, but all she saw was a stranger in a tuxedo. His face was familiar, yes, but it was wrong. He wasn't the man she had promised her life to. Her mind raced. The wedding wasn't supposed to be like this. She had imagined it so differently. David at the altar, smiling at her, the man who had been her everything. Not this. Not standing in front of a man she barely knew, pretending to be the man she loved. She shook her head, trying to make sense of it all. But the harder she tried, the more the pieces slipped through her fingers. "Where is he? Why didn't he come?" Her voice cracked, the words coming out more like a plea than a demand. Mark took a deep breath, as if gathering the courage to speak the truth. He's in a coma, Anna. He's unconscious. The doctors don't know when he'll wake up. It was a bad accident. A car crash. But I swear, he didn't want to ruin your day. He wanted you to have your wedding." Anna felt like the floor had been pulled out from under her. Asterisk a coma? A car crash. Asterisk her world, which had once been so certain, now seemed to shatter around her. She tried to picture David, his face smiling at her, his voice telling her everything would be fine. But now that image felt distant, like a dream fading in the light of day. How could he do this to me? Tears welled in her eyes as the full weight of the situation pressed down on her chest. Asterisk, why didn't anyone tell me? Why didn't they stop the wedding? Asterisk. Her gaze shifted to the officiant, who was standing awkwardly to the side, unsure of what to do. He didn't speak. He couldn't. None of them could explain this. None of them could make it right. Anna wanted to run, to escape from the suffocating reality of her ruined wedding, but her feet felt glued to the floor. Mark stepped closer, his face full of regret. Anna, I'm so sorry. If there was any other way. No, she cut him off sharply, her voice suddenly strong. No, Mark. You shouldn't have done this. You shouldn't have stood in for him. I don't want you. I want David. Her heart pounded as the words left her lips, the anger building inside her like a storm. She had trusted David with everything. He had promised her forever. And now he was lying in a hospital bed, unconscious, leaving his brother to take his place at the altar. Mark's eyes softened with what seemed like genuine remorse. I know, but I didn't know what else to do. David begged me to go through with it. He was desperate. He didn't want you to feel like everything was ruined. Anna let out a bitter laugh, her voice sharp with pain. And what about me? What about how I feel? What about this wedding? What about the promises he made? She looked down at her hands, clutching her bouquet, now limp in her grip. Everything she had envisioned for this day, the joy, the love, the vows, was gone, torn apart, and there was no way to put it back together. She turned away from Mark, taking a few steps back, trying to steady her breathing. The guests were still watching, some whispering, some avoiding her gaze. The shame, the humiliation, burned in her chest. She had walked down the aisle in front of all these people, only to find out that the man she had been marrying was a stranger, a replacement, a lie. I can't do this, she whispered to herself, but loud enough for Mark to hear. I can't marry you. I can't marry someone who isn't David. Mark's face fell, but he didn't argue. He didn't fight her. He just stood there, his hands at his sides, powerless to change anything. I understand, he said quietly. I just wanted to make sure you were happy. I never meant for this to happen. Tears fell freely now, but Anna couldn't stop them. The pain, the betrayal, the confusion, they all welled up inside her, threatening to consume her. She wanted to scream. She wanted to run out of the church and never look back. But instead, she just stood there, trapped in the wreckage of her dreams, wondering if she would ever find a way to put the pieces of her heart back together. Anna stood there, her heart pounding as the reality of the situation settled in. She had never imagined a moment like this. Her wedding day, meant to be filled with joy, laughter, and love, had turned into a nightmare. She looked at Mark, her fiancé's brother, standing in front of her, a man she barely knew, pretending to be the man she thought she loved. The anger inside her was like a tidal wave, rising higher and higher, ready to crash over everything. She turned her back on him, walking away, each step a painful reminder that her life had been shattered in an instant. The guests, silent and unsure, shifted in their seats, some whispering among themselves, others looking on in shock. Anna didn't care. She wanted to be anywhere but here. She needed to get out, to breathe, to think. The walls of the church felt like they were closing in on her. She pushed open the heavy doors and stepped outside, the cool air hitting her like a splash of cold water. She didn't know where she was going, but she had to keep moving. The city seemed vast, yet empty, as if it too had been affected by the turmoil inside her. She walked aimlessly, her heels clicking sharply against the pavement, the sound echoing in the empty street. She barely noticed the people around her, the cars passing by, the world continuing on as if nothing had changed. But her world had. David was in a coma. She had thought he was the one. the man she had trusted with her heart. She had thought their love was enough to withstand anything. But now everything felt like a lie. How could he do this to her? Why hadn't anyone told her about the accident? Why had they let her walk down the aisle, expecting to marry a man who wasn't even there? Her mind was a whirlwind of confusion and hurt. Why didn't he tell me? The question kept echoing in her head. Why hadn't David told her? Why hadn't he asked her to wait, to postpone the wedding, if it was so important to him that she have this day? Instead, he had allowed this charade to play out, his brother standing in his place while he lay in a hospital bed, unconscious. It felt like a betrayal on every level. She found herself at a small park, the sound of children playing in the distance barely registering in her mind. She sat on a bench, staring at the empty space in front of her, trying to make sense of the mess her life had become. She could feel the tears welling up again, but she didn't want to cry. Not here. Not like this. She had been so strong, so sure that nothing could ever tear apart her relationship with David. And now, she wasn't sure who he was anymore. She pulled out her phone, her hands shaking as she dialed the number that had once been a source of comfort. The number she had called so many times when she wanted to hear David's voice. The phone rang, and just as she was about to give up, the voicemail picked up. "Hi, this is David. I can't come to the phone right now, but leave a message and I'll get back to you as soon as I can." Her heart sank. He wasn't there. Of course he wasn't. He was in the hospital, unconscious, unable to speak to her. She thought about hanging up, about erasing the message, but instead she spoke. Her voice was shaky, filled with so many emotions she couldn't even name. "David, I don't know what's going on. I don't know why you did this. Why you didn't tell me. Why you didn't stop it. I feel betrayed. I thought I knew you. I thought I could trust you. But this is more than I can understand. Please, just call me back. Please." She ended the call, the silence that followed deafening. The weight of it all pressed down on her, the tears finally spilling over as she buried her face in her hands. She couldn't remember the last time she had felt so alone, so lost. In that moment, everything seemed uncertain. What did she do now? Did she wait for David to wake up, to explain himself? Or did she walk away from the life she had built with him? The life she had imagined they would share? Her phone buzzed, breaking through her thoughts. She looked at it, hoping it was David. But it wasn't. It was a message from Mark. Her heart sank as she read it. Asterisk, "I'm so sorry, Anna. I never wanted to hurt you. Please, talk to me. I just want to help you." Asterisk. She stared at the screen, feeling a mixture of anger and sadness wash over her. She didn't know how to respond. She didn't want to speak to Mark. She didn't want to hear any more excuses. But at the same time, a small part of her knew he was right. He had tried to help. He had only been trying to honor his brother's wishes. But it didn't matter. None of it mattered anymore. She couldn't do this. She couldn't marry someone who wasn't the man she had fallen in love with. She couldn't pretend that everything was fine when the man she had trusted was lying in a hospital bed, and his brother had taken his place at the altar. She stood up from the bench, wiping her tears, feeling the weight of the world on her shoulders. The day had started with so much promise, so much love. But now, it was a day she would never forget for all the wrong reasons. She didn't know what the future held. She didn't know what would happen when David woke up. But one thing was certain. Nothing would ever be the same again. Anna sat in the park for what felt like hours, her mind a blur of thoughts, confusion, and unanswered questions. The cool breeze ruffled her hair, but she barely noticed. She had walked away from the church, from a man who was supposed to be her husband, from the life she thought she was building. She had no plan, no idea what to do next. The world around her continued on, but she felt stuck, lost in a sea of emotions that she couldn't escape. She glanced down at her phone, her fingers trembling as she unlocked it again. Mark's message was still there, a reminder of everything that had gone wrong. She opened it, read it again, and then put the phone down beside her. Her thoughts kept circling back to David. Why didn't he tell me? The question gnawed at her relentlessly. If David had really loved her the way he said he did, why hadn't he called off the wedding? Why hadn't he told her the truth before this all spiraled out of control? Instead, he let her stand in front of a crowd of people, a bride, waiting to marry a man who wasn't even there. He'd lied to her, and the realization stung deeper than she cared to admit. She stood up, her legs feeling heavy, her mind consumed by the events of the day. She needed answers. She needed to see David, to understand why he had chosen this path, why he thought it was okay to let Mark stand in for him. Her heart still ached with the betrayal, but part of her knew she couldn't go on without hearing his side of the story. With determination, Anna made her way toward the hospital. The city was busy, but her footsteps seemed too loud against the quiet hum of the streets. Each step was a battle, her mind torn between anger and longing. She wanted to feel anger, to stand firm in the decision that she had made to walk away. But there was still a part of her that wanted to believe the best in David, that he had a good reason for everything. She wasn't sure what she was looking for, but she knew she needed to see him, even if it meant facing the pain head-on. When she arrived at the hospital, she wasn't sure what to expect. The sterile smell of antiseptic hit her as she entered, and the fluorescent lights above buzzed faintly. She took the elevator up to the intensive care unit, each floor feeling like an eternity. Her palms were clammy, her chest tight. She could feel her heart beating in her throat, the uncertainty growing with each passing second. She stepped off the elevator and followed the signs, her pace slowing as she reached the waiting area. The nurse at the front desk looked up, and Anna hesitated for a moment before speaking. "Hi, I'm here to see David Mitchell." "Is he awake?" she asked, trying to keep her voice steady. The nurse's expression softened as she glanced at the chart. "He's still unconscious, but you can go in. He's in room 307. Just be gentle with him. His condition is serious." Anna nodded, her heart sinking at the words. Serious. She hadn't expected it to be this bad. She had hoped foolishly that David would wake up and explain everything, that this was all just a misunderstanding. But as she walked down the hallway toward his room, her feet felt heavier with every step. She pushed open the door and entered, the sight of David lying in that bed nearly breaking her. He was pale, hooked up to machines that beeped rhythmically, a stark contrast to the man she knew, the strong, confident man who always knew how to make her laugh, who held her close on dark nights, who promised they would face the world together. Now he looked fragile, his face a little bruised, his body still and unmoving. She stood at his bedside, unsure of what to feel. She should have been angry, but instead, there was a deep sorrow that filled her chest. She reached out tentatively, taking his hand in hers. His skin was cold, his fingers lifeless against hers, but she held on, needing to feel some connection, something that reminded her of the man he had been. "David," she whispered, her voice breaking. "What happened? Why didn't you tell me? Why did you let Mark stand in for you? Why didn't you stop the wedding?" Her questions hung in the air, unanswered. She squeezed his hand, hoping for some sign, some indication that he could hear her, that he could understand the pain she was in. But the machines beeped steadily, and David remained silent. Tears filled her eyes, and she wiped them away quickly. She hated feeling so vulnerable, so exposed. She had always prided herself on being strong, but now, standing in this sterile room, She felt like she was drowning in emotions she couldn't control. She had no idea what would happen next. No idea if David would wake up and explain everything to her. The room was silent except for the steady beeping of the machines and the distant sound of footsteps in the hallway. Anna stayed by David's side, her mind a whirlwind of thoughts and emotions, until her phone buzzed in her pocket. She pulled it out, already knowing it was Mark. She didn't want to read it, didn't want to deal with him, but she opened the message anyway. Asterisk, I don't know what's going to happen, Anna. I just want you to know I'm sorry. I never meant to hurt you. Asterisk. She read the words, feeling a mixture of anger and pity for Mark. She understood why he had done what he did. He was trying to honor his brother's wishes, to protect her from the pain of canceling the wedding. But it didn't change anything. She still felt betrayed. She still felt lost. She put the phone back in her pocket and looked at David again. I need you to wake up, David, she whispered softly, her voice barely a breath. I need you to explain all of this. I need to know what happened. But for now, all she had was silence, and the questions that would haunt her until he woke up, if he ever did. The hours passed in a blur as Anna stayed by David's side, her mind unable to quiet the storm of emotions swirling inside her. She kept looking at his still form, willing him to wake up, to open his eyes, and give her the answers she desperately needed. But nothing changed. The machines beeped steadily, the rhythm of his breathing a constant reminder that he was there, but unreachable. Every time she looked at his face, she saw the man she thought she knew, but now that image felt like a stranger, a version of him she didn't understand anymore. She was lost in her thoughts when a gentle knock on the door startled her. She turned to see a nurse standing at the threshold, holding a clipboard. Are you Anna? The nurse asked kindly. Anna nodded, trying to compose herself. Yes, that's me. Is there news about David? The nurse hesitated, glancing at the machines that monitored David's condition. He's stable for now, but he hasn't regained consciousness yet. The doctors are doing everything they can, but it's still too soon to say when or if he'll wake up. Anna's heart sank. She had known it wasn't going to be easy, but hearing the nurse confirm it out loud made the reality hit harder. Too soon. It felt like an eternity already, and the thought of waiting even longer seemed unbearable. She wanted answers. She needed them, but David couldn't give them to her. Not yet. Can I stay with him a little longer? Anna asked quietly, her voice trembling with emotion. The nurse smiled gently. Of course. We'll check in again soon. As the nurse left, Anna returned her gaze to David. Her fingers gently brushed against his, her touch light, as if she could somehow reach through the haze of unconsciousness that separated them. She wanted to scream at him, demand the truth, but she stayed silent. The anger had melted into a deep sorrow that seemed impossible to escape. She had always believed in their love, in the promises they had made to each other. And now she was left in a hospital room, watching him fight for his life, while she fought against the growing distance between them. She let her head fall forward, resting against the edge of the bed. How did things get so messed up? She thought back to the night before the wedding, to the quiet moments they had shared. David had seemed so sure, so happy. He had held her close, whispering sweet things in her ear, telling her how much he loved her. He had kissed her forehead and promised that no matter what, this day would be perfect. And now it was anything but. The sound of a phone ringing cut through the silence. Anna pulled herself away from the bed and fumbled for her phone. It was Mark. She hesitated for a moment, her thumb hovering over the screen, but then she answered, not sure what to expect. Anna, Mark's voice crackled through the line, his tone tight. I know you're angry, and you have every right to be, but I need you to listen to me. Anna's chest tightened as she bit back her frustration. She had heard enough from Mark. She didn't want to hear more apologies or explanations. Mark, I don't want to hear it. I don't want to hear why you did it or what you thought was best. I just want to understand why you all kept this from me. Why didn't you tell me the truth? Her voice shook with emotion, her anger flaring up again. I never wanted to hurt you, Anna. Mark's voice softened. I swear. I was just trying to keep things from falling apart. David, he didn't want to ruin the wedding. He didn't want to disappoint you. He didn't know what else to do. Anna's breath caught in her throat. She could hear the guilt in his voice, but it only made things worse. David didn't want to disappoint me, she thought, bitterly. He did it by lying to me. Do you think I would have wanted to marry someone who wasn't him? Do you think I would have wanted to stand there and say my vows to a man I don't know? To you. Anna's voice wavered, but she pressed on. You didn't protect me, Mark. You made everything worse. And now, David is lying in that hospital bed, and I have no idea what to do. No idea how to fix this. There was a long pause on the other end of the line. Anna could feel her heart pounding in her chest, her frustration building to a breaking point. I'm sorry, Anna, Mark said quietly, almost as if he had run out of words. I never meant for things to go this far. Anna took a deep breath, trying to calm herself. The last thing she needed was to argue with Mark, especially when it was David who she wanted answers from. Where's he? She asked, her voice softer now. Where's David? Why didn't he tell me what was happening? Mark sighed. He didn't want to tell you, because he didn't want to ruin the happiest day of your life. But I think he wanted you to know before the wedding, but he didn't know how. He was trying to protect you, Anna. I know it doesn't make sense now, but he didn't want to hurt you. Anna's heart ached as she listened to Mark's words. She didn't know whether to be angry or heartbroken. It was so confusing, so twisted. She wanted to believe Mark, but how could she? How could anyone keep such a secret from her? Mark, I don't know what to believe anymore, she whispered, wiping a tear from her cheek. I don't know if I can ever trust him again. There was another pause, a heavy silence that stretched between them. Finally, Mark spoke again, his voice quiet but sincere. I don't know what the future holds, Anna, but I do know that David loves you. He always has. He just didn't know how to deal with everything. He didn't want to lose you. Anna looked over at David, still unconscious in his bed, his chest rising and falling with each breath. She didn't know if Mark was telling the truth. She didn't know if anything would ever make sense again. But one thing was clear. Nothing in her life would be the same after today. And the journey to finding the answers would be long, painful, and uncertain. But she had to try. She had to know what had happened, even if the truth was more painful than the lies. Anna sat in the sterile hospital room, her fingers still lightly resting on David's hand, feeling the steady pulse beneath her fingertips. She had spent the past few hours wrestling with the emotions inside her, the chaos of unanswered questions that weighed heavily on her chest. She wanted to believe that David had a good reason for everything, that his intentions were pure, but the doubt gnawed at her. How could she look at him the same way after this? How could she trust him again after all the lies? The soft beeping of the machines was the only sound in the room, a reminder that David was still here, still fighting. Yet, as much as she wanted to hate him for what had happened, a part of her still held onto the man she thought she knew. The man who had promised her a future, who had held her in his arms and whispered sweet words into her ear. How could someone so loving, so thoughtful, have kept such a huge secret from her? Her thoughts were interrupted by the sound of footsteps in the hallway. She looked up to see a familiar face, her best friend, Sarah, standing at the door. Sarah's face was pale, her eyes filled with concern. Without saying a word, Sarah walked over to Anna and sat beside her, wrapping an arm around her shoulders in a gesture of comfort. "How are you holding up?" Sarah asked quietly, her voice gentle. Anna shrugged, trying to hold back the tears that threatened to spill over again. I don't know, Sarah. I honestly don't know what to feel anymore. Sarah looked over at David, her eyes softening as she took in the sight of him lying in the bed, motionless. You love him, Anna. I know you do. And maybe there's still a chance for you both. Anna shook her head, frustration building inside her. But how? How can I love him after everything that's happened? He lied to me. He let me marry someone I didn't even know. I don't understand why he didn't tell me the truth. Sarah was quiet for a moment, her gaze never leaving Anna. Maybe he didn't know how. Maybe he was scared that you'd leave him if you knew the truth. Sometimes people make the worst decisions out of fear. Anna looked down at her hands, feeling the weight of the words. Fear, it made sense, but it didn't make the betrayal any easier to swallow. But why couldn't he just tell me? Why didn't he trust me enough to be honest? Sarah's voice softened. Because sometimes the truth is scarier than anything else. It's easier to pretend to protect someone from the pain, even if it's the wrong choice. Anna let out a shaky breath. She wanted to believe Sarah. She wanted to believe that David's actions had been driven by love and fear, not just selfishness. But it was hard, harder than anything she had ever faced before. The man she thought she knew was slipping further and further away, and she didn't know how to reach him. The silence between them stretched on, both of them lost in their own thoughts. Finally, Anna looked up at Sarah, her eyes filled with a mixture of hope and despair. Do you think he'll wake up? She asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Sarah squeezed her hand, her smile faint but sincere. I don't know, Anna, but I do know that if anyone can fight through this, it's him. And if he wakes up, you'll have the chance to figure things out. You'll have the chance to ask him the questions that are eating you alive. Anna nodded, her chest tightening at the thought. She wasn't sure if she was ready to face David, ready to hear whatever explanation he might offer. But she knew she had no choice. She needed answers. She needed to know if there was any hope left for them. Can I stay with him for a while? Anna asked, her voice small. Of course, Sarah replied, standing up and giving her friend a comforting hug. I'll be here if you need me. As Sarah left the room, Anna felt the weight of the loneliness creep in again. She was alone with David, alone with her thoughts and the painful uncertainty that surrounded her. The minutes seemed to drag on, the ticking of the clock on the wall almost unbearable. She could feel herself starting to drift into a fog, the exhaustion from the past few days finally taking its toll. Her body ached with fatigue, but her mind wouldn't let her rest. It refused to let go of the hurt, the anger, the confusion. She leaned forward, brushing her fingers against David's cheek, wishing for the warmth of his touch, the spark of life that had once filled him with energy and love. She closed her eyes, her heart aching as she whispered, Please, David. Please wake up. Please tell me everything. For a moment, the room seemed to hold its breath, the air thick with tension. Then, as if in response to her plea, David's fingers twitched. Anna froze, her breath catching in her throat. Had she imagined it? She watched him closely, and then it happened again. A small, subtle movement, but a movement nonetheless. Her heart began to race. Was this it? Was he waking up? She leaned closer, her face only inches from his, willing him to open his eyes, to speak, to say something, anything. The minutes stretched into what felt like hours as she waited. And then, just as the room seemed to go still again, David's eyes fluttered open. Anna gasped, her heart skipping a beat. His eyes were hazy at first, unfocused, but as he blinked and slowly came into awareness, he turned his gaze toward her. His lips parted, but no words came out at first. His voice was weak, almost a whisper, as he finally managed to speak. Anna, His voice was hoarse, strained. "I'm so sorry." Tears welled in Anna's eyes as she held his hand tighter, her heart aching at the sight of him. "David, you're awake." I didn't want this," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. "I didn't want to hurt you." Anna could barely contain the flood of emotions that surged inside her. She needed to hear everything. She needed to understand. But for now, the simple fact that he was awake was enough to keep her from falling apart. David's voice, weak and full of regret, hung in the air. Anna felt a lump form in her throat as she clung to his hand. She had spent so many hours wondering if she would ever hear his voice again, and now that she did, the words he spoke seemed so distant, almost unreal. "I never wanted to hurt you," he repeated, his eyes blinking slowly, trying to focus on her face. "I thought I was protecting you. I thought I was doing the right thing." Anna's heart pounded, her mind racing with questions. She couldn't just sit there and let him apologize. She needed answers, needed to understand why he had put her through so much pain, why he had kept the truth from her. "Protecting me?" Anna's voice cracked, the anger creeping back into her chest. "You thought lying to me would protect me? David, you left me standing at the altar with a stranger. You let Mark take your place, and you didn't even have the decency to tell me why." David's face twisted in guilt, his eyes filled with shame. "I never meant for it to go this far. I was going to tell you, I swear. But I panicked. I didn't know how to fix everything. The accident. I never expected it to turn out like this." Anna's confusion deepened. "Accident? What accident?" Her mind was spinning, and her grip on his hand tightened. "What are you talking about? What accident?" David took a shallow breath, his hand shaking slightly as he tried to lift it to his forehead. "The night before the wedding, I was in an accident. A car accident. It wasn't bad, but it was enough to keep me from being able to walk, to be there. I didn't want you to see me like that. I didn't want to ruin the wedding, Anna. I didn't want to disappoint you." The words hit Anna like a punch to the gut. A car accident? He hadn't told her about that. Not once had he mentioned it, not when they'd been planning everything. Not when she had asked him 1,000 times if he was sure he wanted this marriage. If he had been injured, why hadn't he told her? Why hadn't he just admitted that he wasn't ready, that something had happened? "So, you let Mark stand in for you? You didn't think I would notice?" Her voice was trembling, a mix of disbelief and hurt. David's eyes flickered with guilt. "It wasn't supposed to happen that way. I thought I could hide it. I thought you'd be fine with it. But when I saw you walk down the aisle, I knew I'd made the biggest mistake of my life. I should have told you. I should have stopped everything. But by then it was too late." Anna stepped back, pulling her hand away from his. Her heart was pounding, the rush of emotions flooding through her again. She didn't know what to say, how to feel. The man she loved had made a decision for her, without her. He had put his fears above her trust, his lies above her love. She could barely look at him, the pain in her chest growing stronger with each word he spoke. "How long have you known?" Anna whispered, unable to keep the anger from creeping into her voice. "Just the night before," he replied softly, his gaze falling to the side. "I didn't know what to do. I couldn't walk, Anna. I couldn't even get out of bed. I thought it was best for you not to see me like that. I thought I was protecting you from the reality of it all." Anna shook her head, her breath coming faster. "So, you let Mark pretend to be you? You let him stand in front of all our family and friends, say those vows in your place? And you thought that was okay?" David winced at her words, his face pale. "I didn't think it through. I just—" "No, you didn't," Anna interrupted, her voice rising. "You didn't think about me at all, did you? You didn't think about how I would feel. You didn't think about the consequences of your actions. You just assumed that I would be okay with this? You thought I would marry someone else, even if it was for just a day." David's eyes filled with regret, and he closed his eyes for a moment as though the weight of his own guilt was too much to bear. "I'm sorry, Anna. I thought I was doing what was best. I thought if I could just make it through the wedding, we could fix things afterward, when I was better." Anna didn't know what to say. The words she had been holding in all this time felt like they would choke her. She wanted to scream at him, to demand more answers, to tell him how deeply he had hurt her. But in that moment, she saw the truth in his eyes. He was sorry. He regretted what he had done. But was that enough? "Do you love me?" Anna asked quietly, her voice barely above a whisper. She didn't know why she needed to ask, but she did. She needed to know if his love was real, if it could ever be enough to make up for the pain he had caused. David's eyes filled with tears, and he nodded slowly. "With everything in me. I love you, Anna. I always have, and I always will. I didn't know how to handle it. I didn't know how to be the man you needed me to be." Her heart clenched at his words, but the pain was still there, lingering. How could I ever trust him again? The question echoed in her mind, the answer elusive. She wanted to believe him. She wanted to believe that the love they had shared was enough to fix everything. But could it ever be? Could they ever go back to the way things were before? Anna took a deep breath, trying to steady herself. "I don't know, David," she whispered, her voice thick with emotion. "I don't know if I can trust you again. I don't know if I can ever forgive you for what you've done." David closed his eyes, a single tear escaping down his cheek. "I understand, Anna. I'll wait. I'll wait for you to figure it out. I just need you to know that I'm sorry, and I love you." Anna stood there, torn between the man she had loved and the hurt that he had caused. She didn't have the answers. She didn't know what the future held for them. But as she looked at him, lying there vulnerable and broken, she couldn't deny the faint hope that maybe, just maybe, there was still a chance for them. Anna sat still, her hands folded tightly in her lap, her eyes never leaving David's. His words hung in the air, heavy and sincere, and yet the silence between them felt like a chasm that she wasn't sure she could cross. The love she had felt for him seemed to be fighting against the betrayal, and she didn't know which emotion would win. For a long while, neither of them spoke. David lay there, his eyes closed, as if the effort to speak had drained him completely. Anna's thoughts raced, swirling in a whirlpool of confusion. She had always trusted him, trusted his promises, trusted his love. But how could she ever look at him the same way again? How could she forget that he had kept this huge secret from her? Finally, Anna broke the silence, her voice barely above a whisper. "How do you expect me to just forgive you, David? You didn't just make a mistake. You made a choice, over and over again. You chose to hide the truth from me. You chose to let me marry someone else." David's face twisted with the pain of her words. "I know," he whispered hoarsely. "I don't deserve your forgiveness, Anna. But I swear to you it wasn't easy. I never wanted to hurt you. I wanted to be the man you thought I was. But in the end, I failed you. I lied to you, and I'll regret that for the rest of my life." The weight of his apology, his genuine remorse, made Anna's heart ache, but it didn't change what had happened. The truth was out there now, and there was no going back to the way things were before. She had to face it. She had to decide what came next. Could she live with the pain of his betrayal? Could she rebuild their trust after everything he had done? David's eyes opened slowly, and he looked at her with such vulnerability that it almost made her want to break down and cry. "I know you're angry, Anna. You have every right to be. But if there's any part of you that still loves me, if there's any chance we can fix this, I'll do whatever it takes. I'll wait for you to find it in your heart to forgive me. But I won't push you. Not now. Not when you need space." Anna felt a tear slip down her cheek, but she quickly wiped it away. She wasn't ready to cry, not yet. She needed to think, to understand what had happened and why. The past few days had turned her world upside down. Nothing had gone the way she imagined. Everything was a mess, and she was standing at the center of it, unable to find the right direction to move in. "I don't know what to say to you, David," she said, her voice thick with emotion. "I don't know if I can ever forgive you for what you did. I don't know if I can trust you again. I need time." David nodded, his expression softening, as if he had expected this. "Take all the time you need, Anna. I'll be here when you're ready to talk. And I'll prove to you that I'm willing to do whatever it takes to make things right." Anna's heart clenched. She wanted to believe him. She wanted to believe that the man she had fallen in love with was still there somewhere beneath all the mistakes and the lies. But it wasn't that simple. Could she really trust him again? Could they rebuild their relationship? Or was this the end of the road? "I don't know, David," she said, her voice cracking with the weight of her decision. "I don't know if we can go back to what we were. I don't even know what the future holds anymore." David's face fell, and he closed his eyes, as if her words had shattered something deep inside him. But he didn't argue, didn't try to convince her otherwise. He knew it wasn't his place to push. All he could do was wait and hope that, somehow, they could find a way forward. "I understand," he said quietly, "and I'll wait. I'll wait for you, no matter how long it takes." Anna stood up, her legs feeling unsteady beneath her. She didn't know where to go from here. Her heart was torn in two, and the future seemed so uncertain. But one thing was clear. She couldn't stay in this room, trapped in the past. She needed space. She needed time to think, to heal. "I'm going to go," she said softly, looking down at David one last time. "I need time, David. I can't stay here and pretend that everything's okay when it's not." David's eyes followed her as she walked toward the door, his face filled with longing. "I understand," he whispered. "Please know that I love you. I always have, and I always will." Anna stopped in the doorway, her hand resting on the frame. She turned her head to look at him one last time. His words hung in the air, lingering between them. She could see the pain in his eyes, the sincerity in his voice, and for a moment she wanted to run back to him, to throw her arms around him and tell him everything would be okay. But she couldn't. Not yet. "I know," she whispered back, her voice barely audible. "I know." With one final glance, Anna walked out of the room, her heart heavy with doubt, confusion, and a deep, aching sadness. She didn't know what the future held. She didn't know if she could forgive David or if they could ever go back to the way things were. But for now, all she could do was walk away and try to find the answers on her own.